Thank you, everyone. It's just fantastic to be here, and what an extraordinary symbolic event this is. I believe this is a tipping point. I believe it's the moment at which things begin to change. We can't tinker around at the margins of these existential issues anymore. We can't pretend that by tweaking the existing system, we are going to see the changes that prevent the destruction of our life support systems. We have to change the system. We have to change the destructive, earth-eating, people-eating, animal-eating system we have at the moment for an entirely different one. Now, it's been a long and winding journey for me, as I'm sure it has for a lot of you. One of the things I realise and have begun to see as I've grown up is that educating yourself is as much about unlearning what you were taught as a child as it is about learning the new things with which to replace it. And one of the most fundamental things we are taught as children is the benign nature of livestock farming. Literally about 50% of the books for very young children are farm books, but not any kind of farm I've ever seen in real life. There's one cow, one pig, one horse, one sheep, one chicken, and a rosy-cheeked farmer, and they all live in harmony together like a family, and they talk to each other, and there's never any hint as to why they might actually be there and what might actually happen to them some way down the line. And yet, however preposterous that is, and you can kind of understand why it's presented that way to very young children, it's really, really hard to unlearn that and to unsee it as we get older. You have to fight your own deep instincts to be able to see how livestock farming actually operates. And while that storybook view of farming is tremendously influential, it also meshes with some other deeply implanted ideas, which go back thousands of years, to the Old Testament, to the ancient Greek poets, particularly the pastoral tradition in poetry, which really was first brought together by Theocritus in the 3rd century BC. And the story there is that the city is corrupt and evil, but the seat of innocence and purity is the shepherd with his flock, living in Arcadia, the pastoral idyll. And that was where you found peace, that was where you found harmony, that was where life, the heart of life, was to be found. And this very powerful idea was picked up by the Roman poets, Virgil and Ovid, and then again in the classical revival in Elizabethan England by people like Spenser and Marlowe and Shakespeare, especially in As You Like It. And then again by the Romantic poets, by Wordsworth and his crew. And now again by Sunday night TV. If the BBC were any keener on sheep, it would be illegal. And this sort of myth, this bucolic myth of pastoral harmony is so deeply implanted in our minds that the idea there could be anything wrong with it, any problems with it, is something you have to fight your own mind to recognize. And it took me a long time. It wasn't until I was living in mid-Wales, with Snowdonia on one side of me and the Cambrian Mountains on the other side of me, that I began to notice there could be a little tiny bit of an issue. I was very excited to be living there, thrilled. I thought, I'm surrounded by wilderness. Wherever I walk, I'm going to see amazing sights. And slowly that excitement gave way to puzzlement, and that puzzlement to disappointment, and that disappointment to despair. Because wherever I walked, in whatever direction, there was nothing. There were no trees. There were no birds. I might see 2 crows in a whole day's walking. There were no people either. It was a dead landscape. I could get down on my hands and knees in the middle of summer and find no insects. It was empty of everything except for sheep. And slowly I began to realize that the reason it was empty of everything else was because of the sheep. The sheep who, we see as the very symbol of innocence. In the Bible, Jesus is both the Good Shepherd and Agnus Dei, the Lamb of God. These supposedly innocent sheep had nibbled away all the tree seedlings, so the old forests had died on their feet, and all the edible plants, so that all that was left was this purple moorgrass, Millennia, and one flowering plant, Tormentil, and some moss. That was it. Nothing else was left. The entire ecosystem across hundreds of years had been expunged by livestock keeping. And I slowly began to realize this wasn't just in mid-Wales, but this was across all the uplands of Britain. And then I thought, well, there must be a really, really good reason for this amount of environmental destruction. Maybe it is indeed feeding the country, as they say. And then I found out that sheep farming in the uplands occupy roughly 4 million hectares. That's more than twice as much as the entire built environment put together. All the cities, all the towns, all the villages, all the roads, all the gardens, all the airports, over twice as much land, and yet produces just 1% of our food. An astonishingly profligate use of land. And then I began to realize something else, that what I was seeing in Britain was replicated across the entire world. That livestock grazing occupies roughly twice as much land as all food production, all other food production put together, yet produces 1.2% of the world's protein. This is the most amazingly wasteful way to use land you could imagine. Absolutely extraordinary. And then I discovered something else which just blew me away, which is that livestock farming is the primary cause of the loss of habitats and wildlife on Earth. How could this be, this innocent thing we've been reading about in the children's books? This beautiful sight of innocence and purity that we'd read about in the pastoral poems and in the Bible. And I realized that there was so much I had to unlearn before I could grasp what was really happening on Earth. And I realized that so much of what we've been told about the food system, that we can just tweak it and it'll be okay, was simply wrong. So we see very well-meaning TV chefs saying, yes, we hate the horrors of intensive animal farming, all the hideous things that are done to animals in indoor containment, in huge barns with all the broiler sheds and the battery pigs and the other terrible things that are done indoors. So what you should do is eat pasture-fed meat instead. And everyone thinks, oh yeah, that's what we should do. Well, if we swapped all the meat we're currently eating for pasture-fed meat, you'd probably need 12 planets, which is fine if we can somehow invade the rest of the solar system and farm it, and a bit more of another solar system as well, but actually isn't a very realistic prospect. It's an indulgence. It's what very rich people can do because other people aren't doing it. If everybody tried to live like the people congratulating themselves and eating pasture-fed meat, the entire planetary system would be wiped out. It is as simple as that. People say, oh, it's okay, I'm just eating local food. These sausages come from the farm just down the road. So that's good, isn't it? No food miles. What were the sausages fed on? Soya from Argentina. How local is that? You take this soya from the other side of the world, 93% of which is used to feed animals. You pass it through a pig down the lane and then you call it local food. How does that figure? And then people say, well, look, okay, we get this, but it is kinder to the animals. Yeah, it is. Your free-range farming is kinder to the animals than the total monstrosities of indoor livestock farming. But it's kinder. It's not kind. It's just not as bloody appalling as the alternative. And any gains you might achieve in animal welfare are cancelled out by the extra impacts on environmental systems that outdoor farming causes. And again, this is something that's really hard to get your head around because the whole cultural current is going in the opposite direction. But the facts speak for themselves. A friend of mine calls outdoor pig farming open cast pig mining because of the incredible destructive effect it has on the soil. As pigs packed into far smaller spaces than they would occupy in nature, churn and churn and churn the soil until the structure's entirely destroyed. You get one big rainstorm, the whole lot just comes off the field. And with it, of course, all the nitrates and phosphates in the pig poo. If you go to the Welsh borders and you look around the catchment of the Wye and its tributaries, beautiful rivers, areas of outstanding natural beauty, sites of special scientific interest, special areas of conservation, they've got all the designations. They are virtually open sewers now. And a big part of that reason is free-range chicken farming. Because the chickens outdoors lay down a scorching carpet of reactive phosphate. First rainstorm comes along, whoosh, that phosphate goes off the land, straight into the river, and causes an algal bloom. I was there in the summer on the River Wye with someone from the Welsh Rivers Trust, explaining to me what was going on there. And we got down to the river, and it's meant to run clear. It looked like oxtail soup. So I said, oh, there must have been a big rainstorm and the soil must have come off the land. He said, oh, this isn't soil. These are brown algae, diatoms. And I said, that's algae? He said, yeah, they're just coming down the river, these algae. I said, well, why doesn't the river flush them out? He said, because there's so much nutrients in the water washing off the livestock farms that they're multiplying as they go down the river. This is a fast-flowing river, but they were multiplying as they go down the river. So we step into the river in our waders, and he said, look, you see those white stones on the bottom? And I said, yeah. You see it sort of flickering above the stones? That shows you this is an algal bloom rather than sediment in the water. So we talked for a few minutes, and then he said, you see those white stones? And I said, no, I can't see them now. He said, yeah, that's because the sun's come out. When the sun comes out, the algae reproduce so fast that they blot out the water completely. You can actually see the changes in the water column happening with your very eyes, just because of the incredible speed of reproduction. And that's all generated by the nutrients washing off the land, put there by free-range farming, which is meant to be so good for us and so beneficial. And slowly and reluctantly, I've come to see that there is simply no good way of doing it. However you farm animals for meat production or milk production or egg production, whichever method you choose, it simply imposes too great an environmental load for the ecosystem to absorb. You can't do it. So some of my friends say, okay, I get that, fine. I'll only eat fish. You say, right, let's take a little look at this, shall we? If you watched Blue Planet 2, and you got to that last episode where supposedly it really lifted the lid on the horrendous things going on at sea, you would see that, well, there were just a few little things missing from that, like why the hell any of this stuff was happening. But, you know, at least he did talk a little bit about plastic, and people got really exercised about plastic. And that's good. That's a good thing. You know, don't take it away from them. That's fine. They didn't say why the plastic pollution was happening, where it was happening, how it was happening. It was just this sort of plastic thing for which we were all vaguely responsible. No talk about the plastics industry, no talk about our failed recycling industry, no talk about the exports from our countries to other countries, and it was just hopeless. They talked about the Pacific garbage patch as if it were all just common or garden plastic, when we know that the majority of it is fishing gear. Even in terms of plastic pollution, fishing comes top of the list for marine plastic. But this weird, eerie program, which came at the end of 6 programs which had told us all about the wonders of the sea, completely avoided the main reason for their destruction, which is the fishing industry. Commercial fishing is causing cascading ecological collapse across almost the entire surface of the blue planet. Almost everywhere we are seeing these fishing fleets, either legal or illegal, it doesn't seem to make much difference, ripping apart marine ecosystems, not just wiping out the target species, wiping out the turtles, wiping out the sharks, wiping out the dolphins, wiping out the whales. This full spectrum assault on the marine ecosystem, and we don't even talk about it. And so gravely misled have we been by this, that I saw an environmentalist tweeting in response to Blue Planet 2, her delight that she'd finally managed to persuade Tesco to sell her king prawns to her in her own Tupperware. And she's saying, look, no plastic! I didn't have a plastic bag, isn't this fantastic? King prawns are possibly the most destructive food product on earth. When they're caught in the wild, the bycatch includes everything. And the prawn fisheries are just wiping out entire ecosystems. When they're farmed, it means cutting down mangroves, it often means slavery, it means massive coastal destruction of the nurseries for fish and shellfish, just these massive, horrendous impacts. But we've been so misled about this. And the fishing industry, like the livestock farming industry, has been so protected from public knowledge that even someone who is entirely well-meaning like that had been led astray by this disinformation campaign. So we are here not just to protest, but to draw these crucial issues to people's attention. We are here to say that those benign stories we have been told since earliest childhood are fairy tales. We are here to draw people's attention to the realities of animal eating. The realities in terms of the rights of animals, the welfare of animals, but also of the massive environmental impact which this imposes on our life support systems. That above all other causes, it is livestock farming and fishing that are wiping out ecosystems and the rest of the living world. We often talk about wildlife-human conflicts. And we just assume, yeah, you know, wildlife gets in the way and causes problems for humans. Almost every single one of them are livestock conflicts. Why are badgers being persecuted in this country? Why are wild boar being wiped out on the continent? Why are wolves being killed all over the world where they occur? Because of their impacts on livestock. That's where the real conflict comes. And even people who say, well, we're doing this in the most benign, regenerative way, we are mimicking nature, are producing the thinnest possible parody of nature. You say to them, well, if you're mimicking nature, where are the wild predators? Where are the wild herbivores? Where are the trees? I don't see many barbed wire fences in nature. It doesn't look anything like thriving ecosystems to me. And so much of the land which is currently being used for animal agriculture should instead be used for the restoration of ecosystems. This is the land where we should be bringing back our forests, bringing back our wetlands, bringing back our peat bogs, bringing back the natural wonders of the world of which we and other living creatures have been deprived. And in doing so, we do two remarkable things. The first of these is that we can stop the sixth great extinction in its tracks. Or actually, let's not call it the sixth great extinction. Let's call it the first great extermination. Because that's what's happening. Extinction sounds passive, it's just something that's happening. Extermination, this is something we are doing and something we can stop. And we stop it. We stop it by setting aside the places which are currently being used in the most profligate and wasteful fashion to produce a tiny amount of food predominantly for rich people. We set it aside instead for the commonwealth of humanity and all the other species on earth. And in doing so, not only do we stop the first great extermination, but we also can draw down so much carbon from the atmosphere that it makes a difference between climate failure and climate success. It is this natural climate solutions using ecological restoration to draw down carbon turn out to be absolutely essential to preventing runaway global heating. Yes, we need to leave fossil fuels in the ground. Yes, we need a vast transition in the industrial economy. But we now know that is not enough. The scientists tell us we have left it too late for that and that alone to be sufficient to prevent 1.5 or even 2 degrees of heating. If we are to do that, to meet the terms of the Paris Agreement as we've promised to do, then that also means drawing down some of the emissions we've already produced. And by far away the most effective way to do that is to rewild the land. Let the trees come back. Let the birds come back. Let the insects come back. Let the great beasts come back. Let the fish come back. Let the sharks come back. And the turtles and the dolphins and the whales. Let's bring back our world of wonders. Let's make this the rich and wonderful and beautiful world that we want our children to inherit. And let's do so by transitioning out of the destructive economy into a nurturing economy. An economy that nurtures us, an economy that nurtures the other life forms with which we are lucky enough to share this world. So we come together, my friends, in the spirit of love for each other, of love for those who aren't yet here but one day might be, and that's everyone, of love for those who are not yet born, but to whom we have a great responsibility, a massive responsibility, of love for all the other living creatures on earth, these wonderful, beautiful living creatures and the ecosystems that they create. And above all, of love for the better people that we can become. We rebel against extinction. We rebel for life. Extinction. Animal. Extinction. Animal. For life.